The last thing I expected that evening was to be placed in handcuffs in front of everyone I had ever loved. I still remember the smell of that restaurant: roasted garlic, fresh bread, expensive wine that I had never been able to afford on my own. It was my father-in-law's birthday dinner, one of those fancy places where the forks are too heavy and the portions are too small, and everyone sits a little too straight because they're performing a version of themselves they want the world to see. I was performing too. I just didn't know it yet. My name is Aisha, and for almost 4 years, I had been the invisible woman at that table, the daughter-in-law who smiled too much, agreed too quickly, and apologized for things that were never her fault. I was a military officer, a lieutenant colonel to be exact, but inside that family, I was nothing. A guest who had overstayed her welcome, a woman who had married their son and somehow, in their eyes, stolen something that was never hers to begin with. That night, my husband Farhan sat beside me, straightening his tie every few minutes the way he always did when he was nervous. His mother, Shaheen Baji, sat at the head of the table, draped in pearls and disapproval. His two sisters whispered across the breadbasket, his brother-in-law made jokes that weren't funny, and everyone laughed anyway. And me? I sat there, cutting my food into small, polite pieces, counting down the minutes until I could breathe again. But what I didn't know that day was that someone at that table had already made a phone call designed to destroy me. They had called the police and told them I was a fraud. The door opened just as the birthday cake arrived. Two officers in uniform walked in, scanning the room, and then their eyes landed on me. I felt the whole table go still. I felt Farhan's hand freeze on his wine glass. I felt Shaheen Baji's lips curl, not in surprise, but in satisfaction. She knew. She had always known, because she was the one who made that call. One of the officers stepped forward, his voice low but sharp enough to cut through the restaurant chatter. "Ma'am, are you Aisha Farhan Siddiqui?" The entire restaurant went quiet. 40-something strangers turned to look at me, and the people I called family, they looked away. I stood up slowly. My legs were shaking, but my voice was not. "Yes, that's me." They said there had been a complaint, that someone had reported me for impersonating a military officer, that my rank, my career, was being called a lie. 4 years of waking up at 4 in the morning for training, 4 years of sacrifices and deployments and sitting alone in empty rooms while my husband's family spent holidays without me. 4 years of earning every single star on my uniform, and someone at that dinner table had decided it was all made up. I looked at Farhan. He didn't look back. And that was the moment I understood everything. The betrayal wasn't just that night. It had been building, quietly, invisibly, for years, and I had been too busy trying to belong to notice it happening. They didn't handcuff me in the restaurant. Not yet. They asked me to come with them, calmly, quietly, as if the humiliation could be made smaller by being polite about it. I walked out with my head up. I refused to look like what they wanted me to look like: broken, embarrassed, small. But inside I was shaking so hard I could barely feel my own feet on the ground. At the station, I sat across from two officers who looked uncomfortable, and I started to understand why. The complaint had claimed that I had fabricated my military rank, that my ID, my credentials, my entire service history were forged. Someone had submitted evidence, printed documents with altered dates, screenshots of conversations taken out of context, a carefully constructed story designed to make me look like a criminal. Someone had worked very hard to erase me, and that someone had access to my personal documents. There was only one person outside of my office who had ever touched those files: my husband, the man who had once promised to protect me. Let me take you back, because the betrayal didn't start that night. It started the moment I first walked into Farhan's family home and his mother said, with a smile so sweet it burned, "We were hoping he'd marry someone more settled, not a girl who belongs to the government." I laughed it off. I was young. I was in love. I thought love could fix anything. But over the years, the comments multiplied. She told relatives I was never home. She told Farhan I was too independent to be a good wife. She told her daughters that a woman who outranked her husband would never have a happy marriage. And Farhan? He listened. Every single time he listened. And he said nothing. I kept pushing forward. I got promoted. I led operations that I can't fully speak about even now. I was decorated. And every time I came home with something to be proud of, I found a reason to make it smaller, to not tell them, to protect them from the fact that I was succeeding in a world they wanted me to disappear from. I had been shrinking myself to fit into a space they were never going to give me anyway. 6 months before that dinner, I had found messages on Farhan's phone, not romantic messages, something colder than that. He had been sharing my personal file with his mother, photographs of my ID card, scanned documents from my service record, dates and postings, things he had access to only because I trusted him. I confronted him. He said it was nothing. He said his mother was just curious. He said I was being paranoid, that I was always working and never present, that maybe if I spent less time being a soldier, I'd spend more time being a wife. I believed him. Or maybe I chose to, because the alternative, that the man I had built my life around was helping his family destroy me, was too heavy to carry. That night at the police station, as the officers pulled up my service record on their system, the real one, directly from the Ministry of Defense database, I watched their expressions shift. The skepticism drained out of their faces and something else replaced it. "Ma'am, this says you're a lieutenant colonel with 17 years of active service and 2 commendations." I looked at him steadily. Yes, it does. They looked at the evidence Shaheen Baji had submitted, then back at the screen, then at each other. The documents she had sent them were altered, clumsy alterations, dates that didn't match, a signature that didn't match my actual file, a rank that had been digitally changed. She had genuinely believed she could erase 17 years of my life with a few edited screenshots and a phone call. She had built a trap, and she had accidentally walked right into it herself. Within 2 hours, the police had verified everything. Every date, every posting, every commendation. My record was immaculate because it was real, because I had lived every single day of it. The officers apologized to me, formally. The senior officer stood and said, "Ma'am, we're sorry for the inconvenience. The complaint has been flagged as a false report. The individual who filed it may face charges." I asked him to say that again, not because I didn't hear it, but because I needed to feel it. They drove me back to the restaurant. Yes, back to the restaurant, because by then the family was still there, waiting. Some of them, I think, hoping the police would return with me in handcuffs, hoping the story they had invented would somehow become true just by wanting it badly enough. I walked back through that door in my uniform because I had kept it in the car, as I always did. I slipped it on in the parking lot. Every medal, every insignia, every stripe that represented a year of my life that no one in that room had ever asked about. The restaurant went silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. Farhan stood up. His face was pale. "Aisha, I can explain." I looked at him calmly. "You don't need to." The senior officer stepped in behind me. He addressed the table directly. He informed them that a false police report had been filed, that the evidence submitted had been found to be tampered with. that the matter was being escalated to the relevant authorities for further investigation. He looked at Shaheen Baji when he said it. She didn't look away, but her hands, folded on the table, perfectly still all evening, began to tremble. All that power, all that control, undone in 60 seconds by the truth she had tried to bury. Farhan's sisters looked at their mother, then at each other, then at the floor. The brother-in-law, the one with all the jokes, had nothing to say. And Farhan, my husband, the man who had handed my files to his mother, finally looked at me. Really looked at me. Maybe for the first time in years. And I could see it in his face. He had known. Maybe not everything, but enough. And he had chosen her anyway. I didn't cry. I had no tears left for that room. I handed my lawyer's card to the officer, thanked him for his time, and walked out of that restaurant without looking back. Shaheen Baji was charged with filing a false police report and submitting forged documentation. The case moved slowly. These things always do, but it moved. Farhan and I separated 3 months later. The divorce was quiet, which surprised me after everything, but I think by the end, even he knew there was nothing left to fight for. I requested a transfer, a new city, a fresh start. And on my first morning in that new posting, I sat in my office, in my uniform, with my coffee, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Just peace. Not because the story ended perfectly, but because I had finally stopped apologizing for who I was. People ask me sometimes, do I regret those 4 years? Do I wish I had walked away sooner? Honestly, no, because every single day of that marriage taught me something. It taught me what it looks like when someone tries to make you doubt yourself. It taught me what it feels like to be surrounded by people who are frightened by your strength, not because you're dangerous, but because your existence reminds them of what they never had the courage to become. They tried to arrest my truth. They tried to lock it up in a police report and a falsified document and 4 years of quiet humiliation. But the truth has a way of walking back through the door, in uniform, with its head held high. Your rank is not what they give you. It's what you earn, every single day when you choose not to shrink. No one can arrest your truth, and anyone who tries, they will answer for it. Always.